Welcome to the Elevated Trader Podcast. I am Dr. Kristin Kidgel.
And I am Tracy Ball. Join us every week as we journey into becoming better traders.
We believe becoming better traders involves elevating our skill, our mindset, and our health. In each episode, we will discuss the current book we are exploring, and we invite you to join us on this journey.
Are you ready to elevate your trading, mindset, and health to the next level? Let's do this. And welcome back to another Elevated Trader podcast. And this is part 3 of Man's Search for Meaning. We're up to about page 33, something like that. How are you feeling about it so far?
So I'm pretty sure I shared that it's a little heavy in the beginning. I'm excited now because it's still atrocious what they're going through, but he's starting to get more meaning out of how am I going to get through this? What do we need to do? And then he's really analyzing his mindset, which is really cool because he's getting insights out of that.
And that's one of the things I love about the book. It's one of the things I love about all books is you can really, there's something that you can take from it, whether it's an actual tidbit from the book that's applicable directly or indirectly to your life. And I think, none of us are going to experience what this man's gone through. Hopefully, ever again in history. Hopefully nobody will ever experience it. But as I mentioned in another podcast earlier, that it's still valuable information. There's still things that we can take away from it. And currently what we've been reading since the last part, one of the things that I'm really focusing on is the one part where he talks about an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is a normal reaction. Okay. And now let me say that again. So an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is perfectly normal. Now, I remember growing up.
We don't want to tell too many people that.
No, I think it's important. I think it's important because I think we have this construct in our minds of what healthy reactions look like. And we judge ourselves based on those healthy reactions of what those constructs, I should say, those healthy constructed reactions. And the reality is that if you don't react a certain way to a terrible certain situation, if you don't act abnormally to that, then that's actually showing a sign of something wrong.
I just don't know if there's an abnormal and a normal. I think it's just emotions and feelings and reactions. So
fair enough. I can agree to you to some degree, but I guess the thing is that a lot of us, when we do react in a certain way under undue stress, we react in a certain way and we feel weak. We feel like there's something wrong with us. We feel like I shouldn't be doing this. And the reality is that the situation that you're in completely and utterly warrants the reaction that you're giving. So there's nothing wrong with the reaction. There's nothing wrong with you. It's okay for you to feel that way. It's okay for you to think that way. So let's stop criticizing ourselves. Let's stop punishing ourselves. And let's figure out, okay, now that we've experienced this, now what do we do to get through it?
Right. And again, we're talking about abnormal situations.
Yes.
Not just like your kid didn't put the seat down.
Yeah, exactly.
In the bathroom.
Yeah.
Because I saw that in a movie last night where this father freaked out on his 10-year-old son. And I'm like, okay, that's an abnormal reaction, but that's not an abnormal situation.
Exactly. That's an abnormal.
I hear you.
Yeah, exactly.
I hear you.
And I think that it's important for us to just be a little kinder and a little more loving towards ourselves and less judgmental. And I mentioned it in another episode before. I think I did anyway. Maybe I didn't. But growing up, I didn't even know that. I felt like I was a pretty happy kid. And it wasn't until later that people told me that, you have a really dysfunctional family. And it wasn't until later that I all of a sudden had to start dealing with a lot of the emotional muck that came from my life because I didn't realize that it was abnormal. And it made the way that I look at the world different. But for a while there, you start to think, well, what's wrong with me? What's the problem with me? What's the matter with me? Or you start to look for reasons why you should be feeling a certain way or not. You start to kind of fit into that mold.
Yeah. One of the other things that I think this book has kind of shown me was that, well, first of all, let's back up because he didn't want to write the beginning like this. He didn't want to tell the truth and the gritty parts and the nasty parts. And if he didn't, I feel it would have been a disservice because it brings me back to, oh my gosh, your feet were that swollen they couldn't fit in a boot, but you were still able to sit there and, have a moment where you needed to find humor or try to listen to somebody, because these capos, whatever, that term really means, to me, it means that it's more of a police figure in that situation where they were being monitored. He had to almost disengage from his suffering to become present, to listen to this guy spilling his guts about his wife and his marriage and all these things. And because of that, this capo befriended him. And so we're back to mindset. And that has really stood out also in these recent pages. And then I always try to think, okay, well, where do we take this into trading, and where do we take this into our lives? And one of the things is, he had this situation in his life that was so horrific. You can find gratitude in your day right now, sitting where you are, or every morning or every night you lay your head on a pillow, that you never had to go through that. So if you're searching for something to be grateful for, read this book.
Be grateful for that. Exactly. Because I'm looking for the same thing. I'm looking for how do you take this book and make it applicable to now, to us, to what we're doing. And just to put this into context, there's a spot in here where he is talking about one of the people that's asleep. There's a man that's asleep in the room, and he's having a nightmare, and he's tossing and he's turning, and he's about to go and wake this man up. Mm-hmm. And he pauses and he realizes for a second, wait a minute, there's not a single nightmare on the planet that could potentially be worse or bad enough to compare to what they were actually living and what he was about to wake him up to.
Right, exactly.
So that gives you an idea of kind of what this situation is or was in that environment. It's terrible.
And that he had the mental fortitude to process that moment, not to do that out of kindness.
Yeah, exactly.
Ugh.
And that's the point, I guess, that it's one of the reasons I love this book, because under such incredible strain and incredible circumstances and incredible travesties, I can't even imagine how bad that things were there. They still managed to rise above, survive, overcome, and live.
Yeah, and not knowing if they were going to live next week.
Because of that, I think that if they can do it, I sure as heck can.
Yeah.
By me looking at this and not focusing on the actual circumstances of what they were going through and just focusing on how that makes me feel and how bad, I feel for them, or the compassion and all that, that's there. I'll always have that. But instead of just focusing on that, this book can be a mentor. It can be a mindset mentor for me to what did they do? How did they do that? What are the things that they were doing? What are the techniques that he's talking about? What did he do in that particular circumstance? It's interesting because I watched Just Mercy last night. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
But there's 3 prisoners. Okay. And basically these guys are all on death row. And there's a lawyer that has taken it upon himself to try and revisit their cases to see if they should be there or give them help, because this is down in Alabama. It's in the southern states. And some of these men have been imprisoned unduly. One of the guys is laying on his bed, and another one of the prisoners starts talking to him. And he says, I'm not available right now. And another one says, well, where are you right now? And he's laying there and he says, yeah, I'm having tea with the queen. And he's envisioning having tea with the queen. He's laying in prison in confinement. He's laying there and he's going, yeah, she's a pretty nice lady. I'll let you know when I'm done. And, we're going to get into that a little later in the book, but he's the visualization, the power of the mind, the power of the visualization. And it was able to take, in this movie, it was able to take the guy out of the situation, out of that confinement that he was in, and momentarily remove him from there into something that was more quote unquote normal or human-like for an existence that gave him pleasure. He didn't have to actually be in a room having tea with the queen. He was able to visualize the whole thing, and it gave him a moment of solace.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the power of the mind, because he made it very clear that when one of the other prisoners with him in his group, when they mentally gave up, and it got to, he said it got so regularly noticed that you could almost count the days that when there was a mental switch where they literally, you could tell that that person had given up, you could almost count that person's got 2 weeks, that person's got 5 days. And what I took out of that was, once you give up, that's it, you're done. And they meant but done by death. Like, this was, you're not going any further, you're done. So don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. But like I said, approach this book, as hard as it is to read it at times, remember there's value in these words that are applicable today. That will be the case with every book that you read. There's always going to be that diamond, that gold, that nugget that's inside of a book that you can benefit from. So I challenge all of you to read between the lines. I challenge all of you to listen to what's really being said.
Push through.
Yep, you bet. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining us today. For more information about the show, as well as our list of current reads, check us out at www.theelevatedtrader.com.
Remember to subscribe and share if you found value in today's episode. See you next week.